Hey, everybody. Well, you know what? There's a lot of talk going on about what the upcoming World Cup qualifiers are going to convey. Well, I can tell you for sure that there is going to be a lot of controversy from here on out in terms of what the international calendar will look like, in terms of how the international tournaments will end up being like, because obviously that is one of the sticking points, or one of the big problems that that clubs see, a huge obstacle that clubs see in terms of what's going on with their investments. Now, this is not about siding with anyone, okay? This is about telling people exactly what's going on and give you both sides. It's not about me giving an opinion. It's about me giving you the possibility of saying, okay, I believe this or I believe that. On one end, I would definitely understand why the owners of clubs, the boards of clubs, the investors of certain clubs would not be too happy with their players going out, okay? I think the best tweet or the best phrase that I heard, and I'm going to paraphrase, well, it was Alex Paredes, so I'm going to para-tweet, I think. If I don't, there's no such thing as that word, then I take dibs on it. Basically what he said was, imagine you buying a Ferrari and you use it not only during the week, but during weekends. But your crazy uncle comes in once every other month and starts driving it, and he's not insured, and there's no guarantee that he might end up paying for any damages, and he goes out on 2 weeks of crazy hiatus. How would you feel about your car? And I would imagine that owners of clubs, investors of clubs, board members of certain clubs feel the exact same way. I can understand that. Because many of us, actually, you know what, let me not kid myself. All of us are very brave with someone else's money. We all are. We tell people how to spend it. We tell people how to invest it. We tell people how to save it. We tell people how to use other people's money. Now, when it comes to ours, that's a different story, right? So I understand that part in terms of the Premier League and Serie A, who just maybe 30 minutes before I was started recording, Serie A announced that they too will end up not bringing in players. Now that really kills the aspirations of some national teams. Case in point, Brazil. Case in point, Argentina. Argentina, I think, would only have 9 players that would be able to come to World Cup qualifying play. Well, one of them was Messi, but you have the PSG players and of course players that don't play in England, Spain, or Italy. Still, you could line up a pretty decent team. Decent. Now that starts affecting the domestic league here, because then all of a sudden those players have to be sent out. And by the way, in the case of Argentina, I'll give you that for example. And same thing with Brazil. Those leagues don't stop. Those leagues are not stopping for international play because of the calendar. Their respective calendars, they continue playing throughout. So you have teams that are very complicated to begin with, getting even more or having more complications because of that. Having more complications because they're going to have to maybe release a couple more players than they anticipated. Their best players, I may add. Why do we bring this up? Well, the reason I bring this up is because I understand that all of South America is going through a very tough situation, and they've mismanaged what has been this pandemic to this point still, okay? But it ends up benefiting others. While it does affect South America and affects South American teams, Central American teams, maybe even some teams in the Caribbean, because most of them, if not all of them, happen to be on that red list for the Premier League, for many other leagues. This is why Gianni Infantino's frantically trying to find a way to be able to get these players to be freed so they can go to the national team. He's promising other things that might not be achievable in such a short period of time, but they have the potential to change the scope of how the international calendar will end up being going towards the future. And keep in mind, it's not just only now, it's also going to be in October, possibly in November. Start looking at March, February also, because remember, there's international dates at the beginning of the year as well. So there's going to be breaks throughout the end of this year and then going into next year. So there's going to be a lot of issues there as well. How is that going to continue? How is that going to progress? How are those lists going to change? Because at this point, you start looking at what goes on in terms of the entire scope of South American qualifiers, especially. Well, we'll use South American qualifiers. Of course, CONCACAF, many teams. Jamaica is absolutely decimated. That's the issue with those types of teams. Jamaica, if they end up starting out slow, especially in 6 matches. I mean, keep in mind, these national teams are losing 6. They're losing some of these players for 3, possibly 6 matches, because we don't know what's going to happen in October. Of course, I'm just going to say start with 3. 3 matches, 9 points can determine you going or not going to a World Cup. So that's a problem. I understand that there's a lot of diplomatic issues. There's a lot of sanitary issues. There's a lot of ministry issues. I understand all of that, and it's really complex, and it's very mucky, and it's very political, and it's going to get that way. And I completely understand it. But you could also start saying, hey, you know what? Because some people say, well, it's because it's 3 matches. No, it's not because it's 3 matches. It's because of the health risk that they are. And I completely understand that part too. So, I mean, you can't totally be against one thing and totally be in favor of the other. You just can't, because of the situation, because of everything that's going on. Because it's not just, well, we don't want to let you go because we just don't feel like it. No, we don't want to let you go because, okay, we don't feel like it, but we don't feel like it because you're going to be gone 2 weeks. In addition to that, you come back to the country, you're going to have 10 days quarantine. So on top of missing time with us practicing, you're going to be missing matches in the process, which means that you're going to be being quarantined, which means you can't fully be training during that period of time, which means that you're going to lose your form and you're going to have to build right back up, and you're susceptible to injuries. And let's say what happens if you get injured, and what happens if you get injured. If you don't get injured, then you're going to have to get back in shape quickly and be able to get ready. Oh, and by the way, 3 weeks later, you're gone back again. That has a lot to do with it. I mean, I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. Not that you don't understand. It's just that we're trying to put everything on the table so everybody understands what's going on. It's not just, hey, I don't feel like sending you because whatever. It's a lot of other things. It's the list. It's the risk that the players are running. It's a lot of those things. So I completely understand. But I also completely understand, CONMEBOL, who were promised a bunch of things, who were told a bunch of things, who have been working towards a bunch of things, and they were able to comply with it. They started World Cup qualifying play. They're behind on World Cup qualifying play. If they miss one more window, they're going to have to start looking at reformatting the entire tournament at this point. And that's something that's not going to keep many people happy, with Alejandro Dominguez, with Gianni Infantino, with many of the prime characters in this particular soap opera. I truly hope that everything's fine. I'd like to see World Cup qualifying play, but these players are just absolutely fried. And keep in mind that it's not like Europe where they're they fly in 2-3 hours, 3 at most, and they go back. No, it's a, let's say, from England to Brazil is like, I think, like around a 10-hour flight, 11 hour flight, and on top of that they go to Rio, or they stop at Rio. They take about an hour and a half drive to go to, or 2 hour drive to go to Granja Comari, which is the complex where Brazil trains. Then all of a sudden they take that drive back. They get on a plane and they have to go and travel twice within South America. Sometimes, it's a 4 or 5 hour flight, depending on which side you go. And then you have to fly back another 10 hours to, let's say, England. Now, if it's to Spain, it's like 13. If you go to Italy, it's like 13 and a half, 14 hours, depending on where you're at. And even Argentina is a little bit longer. So start looking at those. Not only that, you have to go 7 time zones, 5, 6, 7 time zones, depending on where you play. So keep that in mind as well. So there's a great deal of strain that's going on, and we kind of forget that too. Oh yeah, they can't play. No, the players are going through a great deal of strain. Okay, fine. They're not flying in coach like we are. They're mostly flying in first class. Lionel Messi's flying in his own plane. Okay, I get that. There's a different nutrition pattern. There's a different recovery pattern. All those are the things that they can invest in if they're smart enough. But keep in mind the ultimate issue, which is being susceptible to turn positive for coronavirus. It's already happened, ladies and gentlemen. It's already happened with the Uruguayan national team last year. Remember that massive outbreak that they had within their camp when you saw photos of them in Colombia and they're drinking mate together and having, a barbecue in their concentration, in their not concentration camp. I mean, translating it directly from Spanish to English. In English, it doesn't sound too good, but you get the idea from their camp to where they're at in Barranquilla right before they took the flight to go back to Uruguay. So when you start looking at all those pieces coming together, you're like, oh, wait a second. There's a problem here. Okay? Now, we can take it to the other. And that one wasn't even on purpose. And that one wasn't even as bad as the one that happened right before Copa America with Venezuela, where they had 15, 16 players that turned up positive. But that's on their account. That's on their own negligence. Because they let family, friends, personalities, Instagram influencers, anyone that was anyone, or anyone that was literally a human being, to even make it more of a broad spectrum. It wasn't anyone who's anyone. It's anyone that was an actual human being that was within the vicinity that went there. And they were taking pictures with their family, with their friends, and anyone else that happened to be around in Caracas. Now, if it's like that, then I'm definitely not going to let my players go. If I have an FA that's been that incompetent or incapable of being able to control the reins in a bubble, then yeah, I completely agree with the FA, with the English FA, with Serie A, with teams in La Liga that don't want to do. I would completely agree. Keep that in mind. I'm not against having played, but you also understand and see who are the people you're dealing with on the other end, and you start saying, you know what, maybe it's not such a good idea that my player goes there. I completely get it. Now, there's certain national teams that have more responsibility, that have better logistics, that have better worked these types of things out, and they've been able to do a better job of it. I give Venezuela as the most extreme case, and it doesn't even take something like that, to be quite honest with you. It just takes, one person that you cross with, one poorly washed cup that somebody just happened to use that happened to be asymptomatic. It just takes that. So it's not just only, complete and utter negligence. It just takes, one little detail that was overlooked. That's plain and simple. So when I say this, keep in mind what I'm actually saying is I understand all sides involved. And that's the worst part about it. Each and every one of these sides has a point. The problem is it's a very complex issue. And nobody has really wanted to tackle it head on, because it's all about who has been the one, or how is this going to benefit me and only me? How is this going to work for me and only me? And that's been the problem. How is it going to help the Premier League and only the Premier League? How is it going to help Serie A and only the Serie A? How is it going to help La Liga and only La Liga? And that's been the big problem, because they've only been thinking about one thing and one thing themselves. Or one thing itself. They've only thought about themselves. Doesn't sound familiar, right? Kind of a reflection of how we've been handling the pandemic as a society. So I received, and I'm going to be answering one question right now for everyone in terms of my questions that are asked. And please send them as much as you can. I will be more than happy to to answer them, and I look forward to it. This one comes from my good friend over in India, Marcos Mergulau. Just, the guy's the real deal, man. He's the best. I mean, when it comes to Indian football, he's the best. So that's all I can say about him. I think I said maybe I'm saying he's the best, and probably it's not enough. Kerala Blasters ends up getting Jorge Pereyra Díaz. It's on a loan. Keep in mind that he signed a contract just for this year. His contract was going to expire in December, and his playing time has been rather limited. So you end up, instead of not having him playing, might as well put him on loan. And of course, he ends up going to Kerala Blasters. And what Kerala Blasters end up getting is a player that can play on three fronts. He can play on the wing, regardless, right wing, left wing. He can play out wide. He can play in the middle. He can play as a center forward. He can play as a number 9. He can play as a second number 9, depending, if you're playing with 2 forwards, if you're playing with 3 up top, or if you're playing a 4-2-3-1, any type of variation, you can move him around and he can produce. He has been able to produce quite a bit, and it would be interesting to see him in India. I think, like I said, he's not going to be. Now, if you're expecting me to say he's the next great player to come to Indian football, I think I'd be lying to you. He's a very good player, yes. He's a very skilled player, yes. He can do many things, yes. But he's not the type of player that you're going to try and get, and all of a sudden he's going to be setting the world on fire. He's that player that can give you that little extra bit of quality. Yes. He is that type of player that can be very important in certain aspects of play, in certain phases of play offensively. That can work out. I can buy that. He can score goals. He has in the past. He hasn't scored many in recent months. So keep that in mind. And to be quite honest, there's a reason for that. Case in point, he's not a number 1 goal scorer at this stage of his career. Maybe he's one that can provide a bit more, that can open a bit more, that can create off the dribble a bit more. He can do that. Now, I'm not saying that he's not a goal scorer. He can score goals, but he's not a goal scorer, if you understand me correctly, if you understand me properly. I truly look forward to seeing him there. I truly look forward to seeing what he can do. And again, he's been very up and down in terms of where he's gone. He's had good moments. He's had not so good moments throughout his career. And it's quite apparent when you start looking at, well, he did very well here. He ends up going somewhere else and it doesn't work out. He ends up going somewhere, does great, ends up going somewhere else, not so great. It's exactly that throughout his career. And it's been quite interesting to see. I mean, he's a person that will be able to adapt to Indian culture, maybe easier than some others. He might be one that embraces the culture even to a certain extent because of his experiences in the past, because of what where he has played. Not that. I mean, he's played in different places where he's been able to embrace and truly be a major player. Now, as I said before, what does that mean? What does that mean at this stage of his career at 31, where he truly hasn't been a tremendous contributor in terms of, putting up numbers? Maybe that's where you start to see him take a back seat, and maybe you start seeing him just be that player that dribbles, that creates inside that final third. Again, like I said, he's a player that to me is quite an interesting get. To me is quite a player that can kind of offer something different, and I look forward to seeing what he's been capable of doing, or what he can do. Okay, especially seeing what he did when he ended up going over, when you start to see him over in various leagues, like in Mexico, when you saw him at León, you thought he was going to do well. He did well in Bolivia. When he was, in the Super League over in Malaysia with Johor Darul Tazim. Yeah, he ended up being one of the more, exciting players in that league. So he can offer you that. Like I said, he's been able to go into Asia and play. So he understands what it entails to a similar extent. So that's where I believe that you're going to see a player that can make a difference on the team. Not that he is going to be one of the stars. I hope that he becomes one of the stars of the team and, he ends up doing very well over there. But if you ask me, my opinion is that he is going to be a difference maker in the team. But he's not going to be one of those players they say, wow, the league in India is just amazing because of this player. No, the team that he's playing for is that much better because he made the difference and put them over the hump. All right, I hope that I answered the question as best as possible. Again, keep sending me questions. I'll be more than happy to continue answering them as best as possible. Or if not, I'll find someone that can. All right, talk to you soon. It's been a pleasure. Ciao.